We hear it all the time, right? The goal is to thrive. It's what we're supposed to be doing in our careers, with our money, in our lives. But what if that constant chase for more and more and more isn't actually a sign of success? What if it's a symptom of something deeply wrong? In this explainer, we're going to unpack a pretty radical worldview that turns our whole idea of success completely upside down.
I mean, think about it. From the time we're kids, the message is pretty clear. The goal is to thrive, and that means growth, always. More wealth, more influence, more status. That's the yardstick we're told to measure our lives by.
Okay, but here is where the whole thing just gets flipped on its head. This worldview asks a really startling question. What if all that thriving isn't a sign of health at all, but is actually a symptom of a massive systemic disease? And that one question, right there, is the key to this whole thing.
So how does this argument even work? Well, to build its case, it uses this really powerful and, honestly, kind of unsettling metaphor. It argues that the way our society is structured, it works just like a parasite. So what on earth does that mean?
Let's break down this definition. A parasitic system, as the source defines it, is basically a middleman. It doesn't actually create anything new. It just shoves itself between us and our own lives. And then it invents these artificial needs to make us think we have to have it to survive, which keeps us constantly working for it.
So, if our system is the parasite, then thriving is the main symptom of the infection. The argument breaks this down by drawing three direct parallels between how our society functions and how a disease actually works inside a body.
Okay, first up, relentless growth. We all know this one. A thriving business means profits that go up and up forever. A thriving person has more and more wealth. Well, this perspective says, hey, what else behaves like that? Cancer. It's just uncontrolled, limitless growth that chews through all the resources until it completely overwhelms the host.
The next parallel is how we celebrate ruthless competition. We talk about market dominance and crushing your rivals. But from this point of view, that's nothing more than cellular warfare. See, a disease thrives by killing off the host's healthy cells. So when one company or one idea totally eliminates all the alternatives, is that a sign of health or is it pathology?
And this brings us to the third parallel, metastasis. You know, when the cancer spreads. We often call the global spread of one economic system progress. But this analysis looks at that and sees a disease colonizing new parts of the body. It doesn't integrate, it just takes over, making everything the same and wiping out local diversity along the way.
So that's the big picture view of the system. But how does this all work on us, the actual people living inside it? The argument is that we're not willing partners in all this. We are, as the source puts it, coerced hosts. The idea here is that our participation isn't some kind of fair trade, our hard work for a better life. Nope. Instead, the system depends on addiction and coercion. It gets us hooked on the promise of rewards while demanding more and more of our very limited time and energy. And this apparently happens in a three-step cycle. First, the system creates a hallucination of need. It makes you believe you absolutely must have that new phone or a certain job title to be happy. Second, we're pushed to spend all our energy chasing that thing it just made up. And finally, the reward we get isn't real fulfillment. It's just the illusion of safety and purpose, just enough to keep us on the hamster wheel.
This all builds up to a really powerful idea. The system takes things that are naturally human, our need to create, our need to connect with each other, and then it sells them back to us as a product. In this view, the parasite is a gatekeeper of our own potential, selling us back our own selves. That's a heavy thought.
So, okay, if that's the diagnosis of the disease, is there a cure? Well, the analysis contrasts this whole parasitic model with a radically different way of looking at the world, and with it, a completely different definition of what it means to be healthy.
And the core difference really comes down to two opposing views. The dominant one right now is anthropocentric, which is just a fancy way of saying human-centered. Nature is basically a big box of resources for us to use. The alternative is ecocentric, or life-centered. It sees humans as just one part of a huge interconnected web where all living things have value.
From that ecocentric viewpoint, a truly healthy system is the mirror opposite of the disease we've been talking about. So, instead of domination, you get symbiosis, working together. Instead of endless growth, you get sustainability. The focus shifts from just the standard of living to the quality of life, because you recognize that we can only be truly healthy when our entire ecosystem is healthy too. So we've walked through a very provocative argument, haven't we? We went from thriving as a disease to the system as a parasite, and finally, to a vision of an alternative. And this all leads us to one final, really crucial question.
It all really comes down to this. When we see our society's relentless, constant drive for more, are we looking at a sign of genuine health? Or, as this analysis suggests, are we just seeing the most obvious symptom of a much larger planetary disease? That's something to think about.